Right, let's get it. Hello and welcome to the Lost Confederacy channel. This is week 11 of the 13-week fiscal program of recovery for American prisoners of war. Today you have myself, Chief Biko, as well as Chief Alligator. And here's always, we focus more so on that first letter in the acronym APOW, which is American. Before we get started back into the 1965 Civil Rights Act, we're going to start by playing the Civil Rights Act bill signing of 1968 with President Lyndon B. Johnson. And again, definitely focus on what he is actually saying in regards to, one, a proclamation not being law, and then also going into the laws that are passed or supposedly have been passed for the Negro. So again, without further ado, go ahead and share my screen and we'll jump straight into it.
Even while President Johnson talked to Chancellor Klaus about America's responsibility in a time of crisis and challenge, word came from Capitol Hill that Congress had passed and sent to the White House the Civil Rights Act of 1968. Included in the measure was a landmark open housing bill, which, when fully effective, would forbid discrimination in approximately 80% of all housing offered for rent or for sale in the United States.
I do not exaggerate when I say that the proudest moments of my presidency have been times such as this, when I have signed into law the promises of a century. I shall never forget that it is more than 100 years ago when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. But it was a proclamation. It was not a fact. And in the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we affirmed through law that men equal under God are also equal when they seek a job, when they go to get a meal in a restaurant, or when they seek lodging for the night in any state in the Union. And now the Negro families no longer suffer the humiliation of being turned away because of their race. In the Civil Rights Act of 1965, we affirmed through law for every citizen in this land the most basic right of democracy, the right of a citizen to vote in an election in his country. In the 5 states where the act had its greater impact, Negro voter registration has already more than doubled. Now with this bill, the voice of justice speaks again. It proclaims that fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life. We all know that the roots of injustice run deep, but violence cannot redress a solitary wrong or remedy a single unfairness. And we just must put our shoulders together and put a stop to both. The time is here. Action must be now.
All right, perfect. So again, if you all kind of caught what was being said there, again, we've read through these titles or these acts that the president was referencing, especially the one in regards to the 1964 Civil Rights one. So what I have on the screen is basically just the titles of each section within that act. But he also kept saying Negroes, and we saw there was no word or no mention of Negroes within these acts. But again, how they would speak to us or speak specifically to us during their proclamations or announcements. But when it comes to the actual documents, the documents don't say the same thing that they're speaking about. in regards to now the Negro doesn't have to be embarrassed when he's turned away from hotels or restaurants. Now the Negro can vote in regards to this 1965 Voting Rights Act. Now the Negro can have fair housing. But as we see and as we continue to work through these documents, we'll quickly realize that this term Negro is nowhere to be found within these documents. But again, just briefly wanted to go over and show exactly each of these titles. So in that 1964 one, as we can see here, had the voting rights in that first title, injunctive relief against discrimination in places of public accommodation. And we see desegregation of public facilities, public education, Commission on Civil Rights, non-discrimination in federally assisted programs. So any programs in which this government is giving money to fund those, equal employment opportunity, registration and voting statistics, intervention and procedure after removal in civil rights cases, establishment of community relations services, as well as just miscellaneous objects that come within or come up underneath this act as well. So it's definitely important for us to kind of understand that as we continue to build on these civil rights acts. Did you want to jump in there?
Yeah, no, it's extremely important, Chief Biko. Just the Title III and Title IV. We cannot let TV educate us. We have to know that first of all, this act is supposed to pertain to us. So we have to know 1964 Civil Rights Act ended Jim Crow or intense military occupation. Title III and Title IV clearly show you what desegregation of public facilities, desegregation of public education. So prior to 1964, your parents or grandparents could not go to all public facilities and could not go to any and all schools. We need to know this as a group of people because this is history on our land. That's a huge reason why we're failing in society today, because we really don't know anything about our history. I'll stop right there.
No, great point. Great point. That's just going to lead us into the document that we're going to be reading about. But it's definitely important because, as we was talking about offline before we went live, if this Civil War, as we know, Civil Rebellion, actually happened, and the 13th through 15th Amendment was supposed to be specifically for the newly freed Negro, then why do we have these 1964 Civil Rights Acts? Why do we have this 1965 Civil Rights Acts, this 1968, 1960, 1957? If all of these rights are supposed to be given to us after this Civil War? Because again, this is 1869. We're talking about, what's this? 1909, and then as well as 1913, or actually before that, because that was the 15th and 16th one. So all of these acts or all of these amendments are coming post this Civil Rebellion, and they're telling us as far as the narrative that this is specifically for our group. But if that was the case, then there would be no need for any of these Civil Rights Acts within the 1900s, the 1960s, so forth. So that's very important. And that just kind of goes back to the question we had last week. If these rights did not apply to us until these acts, these Civil Rights Acts, then were we citizens? We weren't. And I know somebody in the chat last week said, well, we had, birth certificates. And I think you even brought it up last week as well, that Chief Alligator. Oh, well, my parents are born prior to 1964 as well as 1965, and they had birth certificates. So again, what document do we have, or do our grandparents or parents have that say, okay, you are now a U.S. citizen? Because immigrants have those papers. There's a whole process that they go through. So just some questions that to keep in mind, because again, this is the narrative, the story that's been told to us throughout, school, throughout programming, throughout these books, things of that nature. But again, when we're putting these documents up against each other, it's not rhyming with the lie or the narrative that's been told.
What's that 15th Amendment say?
So we go to the 15th Amendment. The 15th Amendment states, Section 1, the right of the citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. And section 2 states that the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So again, race, color, or previous condition of servitude shall not be obliged for any of those reasons as far as being able to vote. So again, we have to ask ourselves the question. So what is the point of having a 1965 if it's clearly stating here that race, color, or previous servitude is not supposed to be any factors or reason to deny one to vote? That clearly just shows that these amendments were not for our group of people. They were for the world. They were for that new immigrant coming over. As they talked, we showed last week, we'll show them again as we pretty much close out, pictures of these immigrants. Some with dark skin, some with brown skin. So that's where you can see that color. Then when you talk about race, they're coming from a different landmass. And servitude as well. We all learn about indentured servants, things of that nature. We even had a build on who was the actual slave on this land. So again, we have to ask ourselves, so why is it the narrative that these amendments were for our group of people when again, they're not specific to us within this document? And as we continue to read within these civil rights acts, they're not going to be specific to us as well.
Yep, and just drill down on the fact that what we know based on the documents is the peasants from Europe were rebelling in the rebel states in the South. This is who the 15th Amendment applied to. After they were placed up under the War Department through the Freedmen's Bureau Act, this 15th Amendment allowed them to still participate in the government that they rebelled against. We're not getting the right to vote until 1965. So we're just running a string through the documents, further proving that it wasn't a civil war. It was actually infighting between Europeans. At the same time that there was a civil rebellion, their infighting, there was unlawful Seminole wars taking place in the Southeast region of North America. But this 15th Amendment applied to the European that rebelled against their government, which is why the Homestead Act was given for those that did not take up arms against their own government. And then those that did take up arms and rebel were placed under the Freedmen's Bureau Act through the War Department.
Correct. Great point. Great point. So we'll go ahead and jump into our readings. So I do have an American inventor for this week. And this week's American inventor is going to be Frank W. Lewis, or Leslie rather. So Frank W. Leslie didn't have a lot about his early life. Could really not find anything about him, only that he was an American. But what he invented was the envelope seal. So he is accredited for being able to, or having the device to actually seal envelopes. And as you can see here on my screen, this is pretty much the figure. So that patent number is 590325, and it was granted on September 21st, 1897. And basically, this is like a two-piece metal or metallic, almost like a pin, and when pressed together, it pretty much seals the envelope shut. That way you can make sure, you know, your mail is secure and things of that nature.
Any information on the city he came out of?
Not on the city. The only information I was able to find when he actually went to apply for this was in Chicago. So it kind of gives a little background, brief information here.
Chicago, Illinois. All right.
Citizen of the United States residing in Chicago County, Illinois, or Cook County, Illinois.
Okay.
But yep, he is accredited for creating the envelope seal.
Got it.
All right, perfect. Did you want to go ahead and knock out the Dr. Woodson quote?
Yep, I'll do scroll down a little bit. Okay, I'll do number 6. Dr. Carter G. Woodson. Today I'm going to do quote 6. All of us should know who Dr. Carter G. Woodson is. We wouldn't have a quote unquote Black History or American History Month, which started out as a week for the month of February without Dr. Carter G. Woodson. quote 6, leadership is usually superimposed for the purpose of directing the course of the ostracized group along same lines. This was accomplished during the days of slavery by restricting the assembly of Negroes to certain times and places and compelling them to meet in the presence of a stipulated number of the wisest and discreetest men of the community. The supervisors of the conduct of Negroes would prevent them from learning the truth, which might make them unruly or ambitious to become free. This is still going on today in 2023. Through TV, they will place people in front of us based on their schooling documentation, right? What degrees you have, how many letters you have in front of your name. And the Negroes or the masses are supposed to follow these people just based off the letters in front of their name. When if they have not studied to show themselves approved, they can't show you anything. They don't know what they don't know. That's the first thing I'm taking from this quote. The second thing is, if you're putting people in front of you that aren't leaders, letters in front of your name does not make you a leader. Leadership is going against the grain and saying things that most people are afraid to say. So that means it takes nuts, it takes heart, it takes guts. School can't teach you that. So what he's telling us in this quote is stop letting them put these people in front of us, these supervisors, to manage the conduct of us. And even the assembly of Negroes at certain times and places, that's been going on my whole life since I was about a teenager, where it's always criminalized for a group of our men to be out in society. So you can see today how they're still threatened about us being in a group, organizing and talking amongst ourselves. The fear of us organizing is still going on today. Anything you want to build on that, on quote 6?
No, I mean, you pretty much hit everything, especially that last point you made, just having us being able to just hang out in a group that is looked down upon, or that is, now considered illegal. I think the term is now loitering or something. They like to put on our group of people. Growing up, that's all you saw, your friends, your older, your big homies or whatever. Everybody's, hanging around, just chatting it up, gathering, and now, that is demonized, looked, frowned upon, so that's a great point. And now you barely see it, within the community, if at all. So definitely great point, definitely a great quote for this week as well. Next, we'll jump into the legal definitions and maroon historical points. Then we'll jump into the document.
Okay, definition 1, American, indigenous to America. Second definition, descendants, one who follows in the bloodline of an ancestor, either lineally or collaterally. Third definition, slavery, a situation in which one person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. Fourth definition, prisoner of war, a person, usually a soldier, who is captured by or surrenders to the enemy in wartime. Fifth definition, school, any institution at which instruction is given in a particular discipline. Sixth definition, education, an enlightening experience. Seventh definition, recovery, a return to a normal state of health, mind, or strength, the action or process of regaining possession of something stolen or lost. In this case, the purpose of this channel, our history has been stolen or lost. And I'll do the maroon points. First historical maroon point was a person escaping slavery, seeking freedom, or breaking the law. Second point, providing unity and a strong defense, came first. Third point, maroon leaders were first and foremost military figures. Fourth point, maroon established guerrilla warfare, planting sharp sticks in thick grass. And if you scroll up a little bit for the fifth point, maroons knew their enemy's language, defenses, and plans. If we look at all 5 of these historical points, we're slipping as a group on all 5. We don't know our enemy's language, defense, and plans. We don't know the history. We don't read the documents. The leaders that are put in front of us are not fighters. They're not military figures. so we can see why we're in this position. And that kind of rhymes with that Dr. Carter G. Woodson quote.
Yeah.
You're getting people put in front of you that have no bark in them, no fight.
Absolutely. Yeah, this rhymes perfectly with that. And you know, these maroon historical points came before Carter G. Woodson, but even Carter G. Woodson was able to see like, okay, yeah, we not in alignment then. And that's what during the early 1900s. And that fact still holds true 100 years later in the 2000s. So like you said, yeah, we're still lacking in these 5 points. And it shows. So definitely have to get in alignment with this as a group. So that is going to segue us into the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And last week we left off on page 3, subsection D. Do you want to take off for the first part?
Subsection D?
Yeah, subsection D. Mm-hmm.
Okay. For the purposes of this section, no state or political subdivision shall be determined to have engaged in the use of tests or devices for the purpose or with the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color, if 1, incidents of such use have been few in number and have been promptly and effectively corrected by state or local action, 2, the continuing effect of such incidents have been eliminated, and 3, there is no reasonable probability of their reoccurrence in the future. So this section is just basically saying no more tests. That was something that they would give to the people in the South, give them a test that they knew they couldn't possibly pass to vote. So now that's being banned in this Voting Rights Act. Section E, you want to say something on that, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I'm good on that.
Okay. Section E, Congress hereby declares that to secure the rights under the 14th Amendment of persons educated in American flag schools in which the predominant classroom language was other than English, it is necessary to prohibit the states from conditioning the right to vote of such persons on ability to read, write, understand, or interpret any matter in the English language. So now we're just getting into a little bit more detail about what they were doing under intense military occupation, also known as Jim Crow in the South. The reading, writing, understanding, and interpreting any matter in English, and then more specifically, any school with the American flag. Just an important note for that, it was always in my spirit, and I remember my parents, regardless of who I stayed with, they used to make us pledge allegiance to the flag in the morning. I never did that. I never did that. And I never had it. I mean, maybe the first time I didn't do it, I was took to the office, but both my parents being veterans, both of them stood behind me, and I explained why. Being grown now, looking back, I was rejecting the indoctrination. I've never stood for the flag, bro, in school. It was me. It would always be somebody like for religious beliefs, so it may be 1 or 2 Muslims, would be a couple of people, Puerto Rican or Mexican, but I would be the only one who looks like me that would not do it. Most of the people who look like me would stand up, but I never did that, bro. Never stood up and pledged allegiance to that flag.
No, I definitely remember doing that, like you said, all throughout my schooling, probably until high school. But before then, yeah, if you didn't stand up, like you said, had to go to the office, or it had to be some reason that they deemed was okay. Guess you don't have to stand. But again, like you said, it was just something on your spirit that you kind of felt like, nah, something ain't right. Something ain't right. And it makes sense too. It makes sense, especially with this.
All right, I'll go to the second section. No person who demonstrates that he has successfully completed the 6th primary grade in a public school in or a private school accredited by any state or territory, the District of Columbia, or the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, in which the predominant classroom language was other than English, shall be denied the right to vote in any federal, state, or local election because of his inability to read, write, understand, or interpret any matter in the English language. except that in states in which state law provides that a different level of education is presumptive of literacy, he shall demonstrate that he has successfully completed an equivalent level of education in a public school, in or a private school accredited by any state or territory, the District of Columbia, or the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, in which the predominant classroom language was other than English. That's real key, because I'm thinking about my grandfather now. My grandfather ran his own tile business, but he dropped out in the 3rd grade. So you can see how that generation would not meet this standard of 6th grade. And this is where knowing your family and understanding who your grandparents were, you'll probably find that a lot of the men from that era, they did not complete a lot of schooling, but those men were successful. So how we changed in 2 generations, where it's just the opposite now. It's, the 6th grade is not enough. You have to go 12th grade and beyond to be considered a success. But what are you really considering success? Because in the real world, it's about financial literacy. So you can have all the letters in front of your name that you want, what your bank account looking like is what the real, let me stop, go ahead.
No, that's true. That's true. Educated in what aspect, like you stated. Because like you said, you can have, PhD, all the letters you want in front of your name that's, making you certified as a professional. But how are you handling your own personal finances? Because that's pretty much how you go ahead and build that wealth, or actually run a business. Like you stated, a lot of our grandparents, great grandparents didn't go past elementary, if anything, because they say, okay, once I know the basic arithmetic, how to add, basically how to count money, then I'm good to go. Everything else will come on the job, basically. So no, that's definitely key. That's definitely key, because you'll have a lot of people who are highly schooled, but when it comes to their finances, they have no idea what is going on, have no control over their own personal finances, which if you're having a business, you definitely know you're not controlling your business finances if you're not doing it in your personal life. So no, I definitely think that's key.
Section 5. Whenever a state or political subdivision with respect to which the prohibitations set forth in Section 4A are in effect, shall enact or seek to administer any voting qualification or prerequisite to voting, or standard, practice, or procedure with respect to voting different from that in force or effect on November 1st, 1964. Such state or subdivision may institute an action in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia for a declaratory judgment that such qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure does not have the purpose and will not have the effect of denying or abridging the right to vote on account of race or color, and unless and until the court enters such judgment, no person shall be denied the right to vote for failure to comply with such qualifications, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure. So here they're saying anything prior to November 1, 1964, they're drilling down on the English competency is what I'm catching from this. If you don't understand, because remember, we're talking about integrating. So a lot of times when you see older, I'm gonna have to use the word television shows, how they would like crack jokes. My generation, we would see people like Alfalfa, Buckwheat, and they would portray these people. When you're young, you're thinking, wow, they're making him look dumb. But as you get older and understand your history, we were speaking a different dialect, a different language. Right. And so now that you're merging this prisoner of war class into equal citizenship under this government, we weren't really abreast on their language. So they were moving that barrier, still allowing this group to vote. I'm gonna say today, we're even dumber now when people vote. Because I'm gonna say the masses don't actually read what the agenda is of the politician that's running for office. They're gonna go based off of the Jewish media and what they market on TV. So I'm going to say we're worse now than before 1965 Voting Rights Act, because we're not an informed group of people when it comes to voting. Most of us are going to go based off of what TV says. We're never going to click on their website, go to the About Us section, and actually read what they stand for. They could be for gay rights, which is what a lot of those Black Congressional Caucus members, when you click on their About Us, when they're running, a lot of them have a gay agenda, but he's coming in blackface, but you don't read. You're just going off with TV shows. You want to build on that?
No, definitely. Like you said, not only just going off with TV shows, you're going off emotions as well. Which candidate do I like versus which candidate will provide me with the resources that myself as well as my community need. Like you said, we're not going into these politicians' websites and reading their agenda, because if we would, you'll probably see, like, we're reading through these documents, there's nothing specific to the Negro, whatever reclassification term they want to use for our group. So that's definitely key, like you said, not being informed about the right stuff. We'll know, like we was talking about earlier, we'll know stats of our favorite basketball or football player. We'll know how to recite verbatim a song with no hesitation, but when it comes to the important stuff, we are illiterate. We know nothing. We are going strictly, like you said, off of the programming that's being fed to us. And they know we're not reading these documents. They know they can give, certain words, and we'll say, okay, well, that's for us. But when you actually go and read the documents, nothing is for us within their agenda. So no, that's very key. And that's one reason why, we do this, so we can actually read these documents, see it for ourselves and say, okay, is this really pertaining to our group? Or is this basically Pandora's box? Because what I'm getting also from this section here, especially when it comes to that literacy and these prerequisite and qualifications, is we know they're bringing over all of these immigrants. So they're like, hey, they have to be abreast on this language as well if they're going to be given this right to vote, or they need to have a certain understanding as well, because they're trying to ultimately use them to replace the American. So we want to make sure that they're abreast on, how things work, how this system works, and also the language that we utilize underneath the system.
Great point. And it's safe to say that those other immigrant classes are more informed, like your Asians, like your Hispanic, because we got 3 caucuses under the federal government. We got a Black caucus, there's a Hispanic caucus, and there's an Asian caucus. Informed group of people are a respected group of people. Why do we have the oldest caucus, but you got the Asian community that dominates the small businesses in every major city? And you also have the Hispanic community that dominates small business. So clearly, even though they're bilingual or may only speak one language, their politicians are educating them as to, this is why you vote for me. I'm going to get this done for you. While we're voting based off of who we see on TV, and just look around your communities in any state. You don't run nothing.
Facts. And like you said, how do they disseminate that message too? Through the mediums that we take in on a day-to-day basis. So when it's time for us, or when it's voting season, they'll put out your favorite rapper, or they'll put out your favorite entertainer and say, all right, use them because they listen to you. So you just tell them who to vote for and give them one reason, even though that reason isn't even specified within that person's agenda, but we'll take it as, truth, and then go on. So again, just showing that lack of intelligence when it comes to understanding, how to utilize this role versus these other groups of people. Hell, Copper Empress dropped the whole document last week, I believe, that showed China knew more information about American history than you could probably tell or ask the average quote unquote Black person. That in itself shows you that their leadership is paying attention, they're understanding, they're giving that information to their citizens whenever they do come over here, because it's like, hey, we have different groups, like you said, caucuses that represent us on this landmass, but you need to be informed about how that system works. And that was just a perfect example of how China's done their information, and I'm pretty sure has disseminated that to their citizens as well.
So I'm right here where it says provided.
Mhm.
Provided that such qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure may be enforced without such proceeding if the qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure has been submitted by the chief legal officer or other appropriate official of such state or subdivision to the Attorney General, and the Attorney General has not interposed or an injection within 60 days after such submission. So we're talking procedure here and the chain of command, which you would have to go through if there's still a standard with your comprehension when it pertains to your vote. Okay. Except that neither the Attorney General's failure to object nor a declaratory judgment entered under this section shall bar a subsequent action to enjoin enforcement of such qualification, prerequisite, standard, practice, or procedure. Any action under this section shall be heard and determined by a court of 3 judges in accordance with the provisions of section 2284 of Title 28 of the United States Code, and any appeal shall lie to the Supreme Court. So this whole section, we're just talking about comprehensive tests. Shouldn't be doing them. Like you said, it's going to lower the standard for these new immigrant classes coming in, and also for the illiterate Negro who was under intense military occupation on the land.
Yeah, damn. And you just saying that again just really made it click. Like again, this, as we're reading through these documents, nothing again is specified or is specifically mentioned in the Negro, only race, color, and I believe that might have been it, or national origin. But again, it just shows that, okay, these documents were, again, for the world, not for the Negro. If it hadn't been for the world, it just would have been, okay, now the Negro has these rights to vote. We're not going to have literacy tests for them. But when you start to see and start to understand the game, okay, yeah, these are for the world. So they wouldn't want to make qualifications or have literacy tests be an issue if they want these people to come over and be a part of this government, be a citizen. We're going to lower that standard. That way we can, it's more inviting for the world. Okay.
We got section 6.
Okay. And I'll pick up the next section then.
Okay. Whenever a court has authority, the appointment of examiners pursuant to the provisions of section 3A or B, unless a declaratory judgment has been rendered under section 4A. The Attorney General certifies with respect to any political subdivision named in or included within the scope of determinations made under section 4B that 1, he has received complaints in writing from 20 or more residents of such political subdivision, alleging that they have been denied the right to vote under color of law on account of race or color, and that he believes such complaints to be meritorious. I'm gonna stop right there.
Yeah.
Go with color of law.
The appearance.
Which is not right, which is not law. And then you see you have to be organized, because he has to have 20 or more written complaints before he even responds. So yelling and marching or, complaining out in the streets, that's not going to get it. From my personal experience in life, it's hard to get a group of us to actually do something in writing together. So that's a dirty little secret to get things done. Yeah, you got to have 20 or more complaints when it comes to the voting, based on what they put here in 1965. That in his judgment, considering among other factors whether the ratio of non-white persons to white persons registered to vote within such subdivision appears to him to be reasonably attributable to violations of the 15th Amendment, or rather substantial evidence exists that bona fide efforts are being made within such subdivisions to comply with the 15th Amendment. So now he's got to compare non-white persons to white persons that are registered to vote. So first he's got to get 20 written complaints. Then he's got to look at the number of whites versus non-whites. So now we're in this make-believe world of law. Now we're in color of law. We're not dealing in de jure law. We're dealing in make-believe where a person can be a dog, which I've said on previous video. A dog legally has more rights than the Negro male.
Yep.
You can't kill a dog on video and not think organizations aren't going to come out of the woodworks to get you locked up, i.e. Mike Vick. But you can kill a Negro male on video today and
Paid leave. Get paid leave. Yeah, great point. Great point. Like you said, persons, that's any entity. Does not have to be a natural being or a natural person. It could be, like you said, a corporation, legal fiction, anything basically. But I definitely wanted to give that color of law definition for those in the chat as well. And what the color of law is the appearance or symbionts without the substance of legal right, misuse of power possessed by the virtue of state law and made possible only because wrongdoer is clothed with authority of state is taken under the color of state law. So again, it's basically just the appearance or semblance of law without it actually having legal right. So that's very key, especially because they're stating all of this is coming up underneath this color of law term, especially when in regards to that 15th Amendment.
We'll pick up the appointment of examiners is otherwise necessary to enforce the guarantees of the 15th Amendment. The Civil Service Commission shall appoint as many examiners for such subdivision as it may deem appropriate to prepare and maintain list of persons eligible to vote in federal, state, and local elections. Such examiners, hearing officers provided for in Section 9A and other persons deemed necessary by the Commission to carry out the provisions and purposes of this act shall be appointed, compensated, and separated without regard to the provisions of any statute administered by the Civil Service Commission. And service under this act shall not be considered employment for the purpose of any statute administered by the Civil Service Commission, except the provisions of Section 9 of the Act of August 2nd, 1939, as amended 5 U.S.C. 1181, prohibiting partisan political activity, provided that the commission is authorized after consulting the head of the appropriate department or agency to designate suitable persons in the official service of the United States with their consent to serve in these positions. Examiners and hearing officers shall have the power to administer oaths. So we're talking about the Civil Service Commission. It's not employment, but you will be paid for your service. So the question that I would have based on that time frame is who's on that Civil Service Commission? It was probably Europeans. And so they're managing or governing over the Negro, of course, and all the illegal immigrants that are now going to start coming up under the United States government as citizens throughout the late 60s and through the 70s and 80s. So we can see here how it's almost like, no, this act is actually enforcing the 15th Amendment, or it's broadening the 15th Amendment. Let me say it like that. What this act is doing is just broadening the 15th Amendment, which means the 15th Amendment was basically a useless amendment, if you will, because you're having to come in and you're having to create this act through Congress to clean up what was written in the 15th Amendment. You gotta spell it out now because you've got all these war tactics that have gone on for over 100 years against one particular group of people, and trying to enter into a system that they were never supposed to be a part of. Anything you want to say on that?
No, definitely. Yeah, just highlights that. Going back to what that 15th Amendment said on that section 2 of it. I'm gonna come back to, it said the Congress shall have the power to enforce this article. So like you said, this is the act in which they're actually enforcing that 15th Amendment. Because without it, it seems like it didn't have any teeth in or any actual power behind that 15th Amendment. So like you stated, it was basically just worthless. They were able to go ahead and make these different tactics to prevent the Negro from voting or the Negro from being involved in any of the political aspect of this United States government. But now, like you said, they're being more detailed in how they'll manage that, but also, like you stated, are broadening it out to include pretty much everybody. Because again, what we're stated or what we're told in history is that the 13th through 15th Amendment was for the newly freed Negro slaves. But this here is stating that, hey, this is basically for everybody. And again, that's just the contradiction that we're seeing between, that lie that's been told through United States history versus what the actual documents are saying. I'll pick up on section 7 here. So section 7, the examiners for each political subdivision shall, at such places as the Civil Service Commission shall by regulation designate, examine applicants concerning their qualifications for voting. An application to an examiner shall be in such form as the commission may require and shall contain allegations that the applicant is not otherwise registered to vote. So here looks like they're going through the process of actually filling out application to even be able to vote. That's what I'm getting from that section there, from section A. Subsection B, any person whom the examiner finds in accordance with instructions received under section 9B to have the qualifications prescribed by state law not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States shall promptly be placed on a list of eligible voters. A challenge to such listing may be made in accordance with section 9A and shall not be the basis for a prosecution under section 12 of this act. The examiner shall certify and transmit such list and any supplements as appropriate at least once a month to the offices of the appropriate election officials with the copies of the Attorney General and the Attorney General of the state. And any such list and supplements thereto transmitted during the month shall be available for public inspection on the last business day of the month and in any event not later than the 45th day prior to any election. So here, what I'm getting is that, again, they're showing the pretty much process of submitting to even applying to vote. Looks like this will need to be reviewed, looks like on a monthly basis, as far as having this list of newly or pretty much list of applicants that want to be registered to vote, sent to, did it say not the Attorney General, but the Commissioner. So again, just showing the structure, the process that these new immigrants basically will have to be going through in order to actually apply to vote.
Yeah, and who accounts for that for our group of people, even no later than the 45th day prior to
In the election.
Yeah, transmitted during the month should be available for public inspection. So who even does that? Who accounts for that?
Yeah.
Based on our group of people? That's something that I've never been made aware of. That's something that's not advertised amongst our people as far as going back and actually seeing who registered and who actually did vote, coming back with that report. Again, everything is based off of TV right now, which is basically like a magic wand. It's programming. So this is just further information that an uninformed group of people, we're supposed to be in last place right now as a group, because we're uninformed on just so many things. Our history, number one, how this thing works as a whole, number two. So it makes sense that other groups of people come over here and leapfrog us and benefit.
Yeah, no, I have to agree. Especially that last sentence, like you stated, just being able to be reviewed for public inspection. So we should be able to have, this list or who is disseminating this information to us in regards to this list. Okay, we have X amount of people that's registered, but only a certain amount of those people registered have voted, type of thing. So yeah, it's just all kind of showing, like you stated, why we're currently in last place underneath this government, underneath this system. So I'll continue here. The appropriate state or local election official shall place such names on the official voting list. Any person whose name appears on the examiner's list shall be entitled and allowed to vote in the election district of his residence unless and until the appropriate election official shall have been notified that such person has been removed from such list in accordance with subsection D, provided that no person shall be entitled to vote in any election by virtue of this act unless his name shall have been certified and transmitted on such a list to the offices of the appropriate election officials at least 45 days prior to such election. So basically stating here that this act does not pretty much automatically give everybody registration or everybody the ability to vote. You still have to pretty much apply, fill out that application and be registered and be on that list in order to vote no later than 45 days prior to whichever said election is being had at that time. We got subsection C, the examiner shall issue to each person whose name appears on such a list a certificate evidencing his eligibility to vote. Subsection D, a person whose name appears on such a list shall be removed therefrom by an examiner if such person has been successfully challenged in accordance with the procedure prescribed in subsection or section 9 or 2. He has been determined by an examiner to have lost his eligibility to vote under state law not inconsistent with the Constitution and the laws of the United States. So basically here they're saying that, hey, appears that as long as, or pretty much the procedure to be removed, that has been, or that can be determined by the state law as long as it's not going against or counteracting whatever is listed within the Constitution of the United States here.
Yeah, and you also got to add in, there was no information age, there was no computers back then. Everything was probably manual. So the reality is, how many applications even really got submitted? You know, you could have went down there to register and they could have just filed 13 your application afterwards. What are you going to do? Are you going to go through the court process and fight? And, you know, so just, it sounds good on paper, but when I'm pretty sure it didn't pass the acid test in a lot of situations because you had to hope that the Europeans that were governing these different commissions and working. Exactly.
Yeah, that's very key, very key. Like you always say, who was in these positions to make sure the information was being filed. Just because, you know, an act is passed doesn't mean that, okay, now these people's mindset or behavior towards our group has automatically changed. Like you said, it's great on paper as far as the procedure, but again, these individuals are still the ones that were, you know, will educate your children during the day and then hang the parents, the uncles, the brothers at night. So again, we still have to continue to have that or understand that at this time as well. Section 8, we at 801, okay. Section 8, whenever an examiner is serving under this act in any political subdivision, the Civil Service Commission may assign at the request of the Attorney General one or more persons who may be officers of the United States to enter and attend at any place for holding an election in such subdivision for the purpose of observing whether persons who are entitled to vote are being permitted to vote, and to enter and attend at any place for tabulating the votes cast at any election held in such subdivision for the purpose of observing whether votes cast by persons entitled to vote are being properly tabulated. Such persons so assigned shall report to an examiner appointed for such political subdivision to the Attorney General, and if the appointment of examiners has been authorized pursuant to Section 3A to the court. So again, just further showing the process or procedures of people in place that's supposed to be making sure things are actually running how they're supposed to. But again, who were these people at this time? Majority, mostly European US citizens. So again, were they actually acting in good faith in regards to making sure that all of these votes were being cast properly and things of that nature?
Yep. So that'll close us out as we hit the hour mark.
Okay.
last week was the milestone. It's not an anniversary, but the milestone of Bloody Sunday, which ties into this 1965 Voting Rights Act. Can you pull up the date of Bloody Sunday? Again, this is our history, so we need to know that. And we were showing that video when we were reading the 1964 Civil Rights Act, how the Edmund Pettus Bridge and the Hastings business where they were sicking dogs and killed us. So we're talking about, no, you got to put Alabama, Selma, Alabama. Okay, so that was March 7th, 1965. It further proves that if we're not prisoners of war at this time, right, and it is what it is, we were prisoners of war, because you can see National Guard and state and local enforcement were there beating our ancestors to have the right to vote. Now, we got to keep in mind the year prior in 1964, the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, which ended intense military occupation, which is also known as Jim Crow. So this past weekend was a milestone. This should not be an anniversary.
Right.
They're calling it anniversary now, like you're celebrating the death and murder and beating of your own people, when this is what had to take place in order to have the right to vote. And so this is what happens on a yearly basis since those murders. The reason why I'm reminding us of this and bringing this up is we're now into the second Civil Rights Act. We've read the 1964, which ended intense military occupation, AKA Jim Crow. Now we're reading the 1965 Voting Rights Act, but no repair has been done for the murders that took place that day, the lynchings that took place prior to us being citizens of this United States government. So when Chief Biko and myself are saying that there's nothing specific to the Negro, Black, or colored, that's what we're saying. This is a bad business deal. We are settling for the bare minimum in a society. You've not been, they never repaired you from all the towns that were burned, all the towns that were flooded, all the murders, all the hanging postcards where you got all those people that were accessories to the crime. No charges have ever been pressed. The 14 people that got killed that day on Bloody Sunday, nobody's ever been charged with murder. It's been relegated to a march. That's a problem when you apply the first law of nature, which is self-preservation. We're out of alignment as a group of people, and this goes back to leadership. You have to be able to wear two hats as a leader. You have to wear the hat of a businessman, and you have to be able to wear a hat when it's time to get on gangster shit. We've never put that hat on. I'm gonna stop right there.
No, shit, you just said it, man. We had to be willing to actually fight. Like, you have to. And like you stated, every other group has that mentality or understands that. We're gonna give examples. Hell, you got the Mexican cartel, you have the Italian mafia, you have, hell, even when it comes down to the Asians or the Chinese, for example, you have the triad. So every group has their warrior class. Some may call them, gangsters or whatever, but those were still people in business. Like you stated, they wore hats of business, but they also understood, hey, when it has to be on demon time, as my generation likes to call it, they're fine with doing that because they understand that it's necessary. Because going, like you just stated, with the whole still going for remembrance, but Selma till this day still looks like what is pictured on the screen. So it's almost like they're going there as a living museum just to see like, damn, this is the good old times. No money is being pumped into, this town, like you said, to repair all of this tragedy, all of these murders, things of that nature. So still looking exactly like how I did in 1965. But yeah, no funding there, just going there to get photo ops as far as your president, your politicians, and then going back to their appropriate residence. And we allow this as a group. Go ahead.
Oh, you got somebody in the chat, Dark Gable, the Khan. He shared that after the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the murders continue and gave rise to the Black Panther Party for self-defense. That is correct. Yeah. And then he said, our people are just scared to death.
Yeah.
Muhammad was the only one. I'll just add on to what you were just briefly sharing. Before we can get to business, you got to adhere to the first law of nature, which is self-preservation. The people who died that day, they have aunties, uncles, grandparents, mothers, fathers. You've never given justice to those people. The kids that were hit with water hoses in Selma, Alabama during this whole time. Nothing was ever done. No convictions, there was no court cases, nothing. You've been relegated to call it an anniversary and show up and just walk across the bridge. If we can't see that we're out of alignment with nature, no other warm-blooded mammal on planet Earth behaves that way after being murdered. And I would just say, in addition to that, if we're not prisoners of war, you're looking at images. Why else would the state and the National Guard show up and beat and kill you when you're trying to just vote under the government? If you're not underneath and outside the government, why did this happen? So we like to run from reality and say, oh, well, I'm not going to say we like to run from reality. We'll embrace the word slave, but we won't embrace the reality of prisoner of war. Because if you're trying to say you were a slave, then how do you explain what happened from 1865 to 1965? What would you call that happened from 1865 to 1965? You can't call it slavery. The fact that the police were killing and beating people's ass just for trying to have a right to vote. What is that? And we get stuck on stupid right there because we're afraid. I'm talking to the men right now. You're afraid to protect your wife, your mother, your father, your kids, your uncles, your aunts, and your cousin. Your pussy. That's the bottom line. You will let them kill one of your family members, and then you're the only group of people that will call it an anniversary and march one time a year after your ass whooping.
Straight up. Like you said, we got a duty. We have a duty as men of our community. If not, we're just, again, watching the erasure of our people, the continuous murder. I'm pretty sure, I know we're coming up on the end of this first fiscal quarter. Still, Tyree Nichols, no rights or anything like that. But in regards to each quarter, you're going to see some traumatizing shit happen to our group, and it's going to be continuous for each quarter. It's like a damn ritual at this point. But like you said, yeah, we have to get back to that point of not being afraid to put our lives on the line for our families. And that's just as simple as that. Nobody is coming to save us. Regardless of your religious beliefs, no sky daddy is going to just automatically and say, snap his fingers and peace be unto the world. We have to enact that first law of nature, like you stated, which is self-preservation. No other group is going to care about our group like we are. So if we're saying like, well, shit, y'all are not even willing to pick up no sticks and die for your folks, why the hell would we come to aid you?
You also you got original Skywalker in the chat as well. She She made a statement. She said, I don't think they are scared. They just ignorant of our history. Let me see. I'm going to say, I don't agree with that because we've seen so many murders since Trayvon Martin. So even if we don't know our history, well, no, you do got a point. It's yeah, because we're saying it every Sunday, Chief Biko, that we don't know our history. So it's like we're a group of people that are walking around with the memory of a fruit fly, which is why we have on the community page Tyree Nichols. My high people have just forgot that they dropped that video like it was a Michael Jackson video feature just 6 weeks ago. But yet your Congressional Black Caucus has not written anything to reform or defund the police. So how we suppress our murders amongst ourselves and just move on to the next entertainment, I don't have an explanation for it. I'm not a doctor that deals with the mind, but it's, I guess if I simplified it, it's like, you're going to get your lunch money took every week, and it's like, you're okay with it. Like, you're going to see a video of one of your people getting killed, and it'll shock you at the moment, and then you'll just go back to sleep. So I guess Original Skywalker does have a point. That's a good one. I'm conflicted on that. I'm really conflicted on that because we see it. We may not know what our parents went through and our grandparents went through in the 60s. And I think that's out of embarrassment as men and women. I don't think they really want to get into, how they were barred from society the way they were. Hell, they actually promoted and pushed us that were born in the 70s, to be all you can be. Now you're integrated, but they never really talked about it. You got to be able to talk about the good and the bad. I think that's what makes you who you are. Anytime somebody stands in front of you and only got the good to say about them, I already know you're full of shit. There has to be good and bad that makes you who you are. So it's like with our group of people, we'll talk about slavery, but we won't talk about the ass kicking for the next 100 years after the supposed slavery, when in reality, we were never under slavery. We've been prisoners of war on our own land. But we won't do our own genealogy and do the history on our family to find out that you're from the land. So it even starts there. They really should just take history out of school. Like, you can teach math, you can teach English, you can teach science, but they really need to take history out of public school, because it's literally, there's no way a teacher can tell you about your family tree. There is no way that a teacher can tell you about your family tree, who you are. So they're indoctrinating our group of people to tell us that we're slaves. They're not getting into detail about what's happened to us. And we've never had trials or court hearings to correct the wrongs. Hell, they won't even do Emmett Till. You know how many Emmett Tills happen?
Yeah.
Anybody else in the chat that you're seeing? Let me see.
We got Dark Gable that be saying my people fought back and had to leave the South. Yeah, that's where you get a lot of that. The Great Migration wasn't as if people were going for job opportunities. It was for constant warring against our people here within under this Jim Crow South. So definitely a lot of stories like that for sure.
And the sad part about what Dark Gable mentioned about the Black Panther Party, those people are still locked up as political prisoners of war to this day. Mm-hmm. And you would think that we would have a team of lawyers that would have gotten them out of prison. Mm-hmm. So when you look at this group, I'm going back to it. We're so pussy at this point that why would you want to stand up for this group of people when they'll easily forget about you when you do stand up? The fact that we got Black Panthers and Deacon of Defense people right now to this day still incarcerated. You had two religious leaders, one of Muslim faith, one of Christian faith, both killed to get you desegregation and to get you a voting right. And it's like we just move on. Then you got the most recent, you got Grandmaster Jay from the NFAC, who was able to bring light to the Ahmaud Arbery case and the Breonna Taylor case, and people forgot about him. They did a whole thing on that this week, right? About how corrupt.
Think about how the Louisville
Department is
Police
corrupt.
Department was corrupt.
And nobody said anything about Grandmaster Jay and the NFAC. So yeah, why would you want to represent or fight for a group of people that will literally leave you hanging? They just created a narrative and left him out when the lady would have never got a murder scene created if it wasn't for. We scared, man.
Yeah, they didn't even have the crime scene. They had to reconstruct it, and they only reconstructed the crime scene after GMJ pulled up to Louisville. So again, like you stated, there wouldn't even been a case. There wouldn't even been a civil case or criminal case hadn't it been for those group of individuals. But like you stated, how, you know, that's just thrown to the wayside. It's almost like, you know, I'm not sure if we as a group are looking for that perfect individual, but again, in order to back, but like you stated, you have one of Christian belief with MLK. If you ain't a Christian, you had one with Muslim belief in Malcolm X, and you have these different groups. So it's like, damn, we done packaged it all these different kind of ways, yet no matter how it's packaged, the support for those people is thrown to the wayside. Like you stated, if we have all of these lawyers and professionals in these industries, you would think it would be an easy case to go ahead and, you know, let's put up somebody and make sure we get these folks home. Because shit, go back to the maroon historical points. Shit, first and foremost, you know, were military warriors, were leaders. Those were the leaders.
Yeah,
like said, that makes sense out there.
You got some activity going on in the chat. You got you got original Skywalker. She was raised by her grandmother.
And that's the guy.
She didn't like talking about her history. Yeah, a lot of our elders don't like talking about it. IG the finisher. People don't believe we're still at war. That's a fact. That's hard to believe. That's cognitive dissonance at this point. Like if you, my son is in high school and he realizes that what's going on. Think about the generation that was in high school from Trayvon Martin to now. That's all they've seen is the death of young Black men. Then you got Dark Cable again. I don't trust Scam Master Jay. He was on video doing security at a Trump rally. What the fuck? Only thing I would say to that is that was a narrative that Tariq Nasheed was pumping. You know, it's unfortunate that as a man, I got nothing to say about a man that did those two things that I stated. Ahmaud Arbery, if it wasn't for that man pulling up, getting the party started, bringing attention to that case, that would have never got traction. And Breonna Taylor's case would have never got traction. Tariq Nasheed, he's a movie maker and he's an entertainer. It's unfortunate that, well, let me say it like this. If that's true, if Tariq Nasheed was correct, that man wouldn't be in federal prison right now.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm not, that's just where I am on it. I can't say nothing about a man or the men and women that stood up and went out there on that type of time if I was not out there, you know. So that's as men, we gotta operate on man time, and man time is, you know, I can't Sunday quarterback a man that stood up and fought, whether he won or lost, when he's got in the ring and fought. That's where I am on that. But it still doesn't change the fact that we don't support those of us that do stand up, going all the way back to the Black Panthers in the 60s. You know, we'll come up with a reason why, you know, we don't want to get them out. And so those of us that will ride, just understand, we'll watch this and we'll sit back and we'll see, okay, our people will find a reason not to support. So what ends up happening is more groups of people find it comfortable to kill us because they know there's going to be no retaliation, because there's no support for the people that will ride. I'm just going to leave it right there. It's just unfortunate. We'll stay on this cycle. And at some point, there's no right or wrong. It's when you look at the Mexican mafia, you look at the Italians, you look at the militia. If you take January 6th as a prime example, they bum rushed the Capitol on January 6, 2021. They don't, no other group of people, the men of that group, they don't sit there and nitpick. They straight up represented and protected them people that did what they did on January 6th. My stance on that is we have to get to that level that when it comes time to stand up and protect your people, we can't get in the weeds about this or that. You know, I think January 6th is a great litmus test for us as a group of people. That was on worldwide TV. And you straight up saw the United States government say, no, we're not going to openly lock up everybody that was there. It was lawyers there. It was officials there. It's active military people there. You know, no, they're not going to do that. But we'll crucify our own. So
Yeah.
Who else in the chat?
A lot of good ones. A lot of good ones. Folks saying basically, you know, how they would ask their grandmothers, you know, how was that at time? And I think Tony Furlow stated that grandmother would get angry whenever, you know, asking about that history. But that just kind of goes back to Skywalker's point as far as, you know, we need to understand that history from our elders. Like, we need those stories to be passed down. That way we can understand what we're fighting for as well. Because that just attaches us and gives us, you know, that purpose. Like I said, if we don't know, then it's like, you just don't know. You don't know what you're fighting for. You just think it's just some crazy shit or some racism. But again, it's just all military occupation. But we definitely need those stories because it brings it home to, you know, you on a personal level, at least in my opinion. If you hear a story from like your grandmother being ran out of a town or something like that, now it's like, okay, nah, that shit hit home because now you're talking about a direct connection to my family. So I think it's very important for us to understand that and get those stories passed down from our grandparents, no matter how horrific or traumatizing they may be. But it's definitely needed.
It's been a good build today. Yeah, thanks for everybody in the chat that's been hitting on this topic. It's our history. We're the lion with no heart right now. And it hurts me to say that because I'm gonna say it like this. I'm a part of a group of people that, you know, I'm connected to y'all by blood, but I do not operate like this in the real world off this internet shit. You know, you want to win in society, you got to study to show yourself approved. You got to know what time it is. You got to understand, like, everything that Dr. Carter G. Woodson says in them quotes. You want to get ahead out here in the real world, you got to do that. It's just unfortunate that those of us that may have positive things going on the individual level outside of the internet, we're still a part of a losing team. And that's the part that's hard for me. I'm on a losing team. I can be all pro. I can get my 30 points a night, but my team doesn't win. That's what's frustrating for me, is that I'm a part of a group of people that we've been losing for over 100 years. And it's not frustrating, it's just a reality, but at the same time, it's just a matter of time before something happens that's going to touch close to your family. You know, the Tyree Nichols and all these different situations. You know, how long do you think you can keep, you know, putting your head in the sand before one of your extended family members ends up getting put in this situation, and then you get faced with the reality that there is no organization that has your back? You know, you don't have anybody that's willing to pull up in all black, like a Black Panthers or NFAC. You can't go to the NAACP, Congressional Black Caucus. You're going to be completely dependent on a crump. And the best he can do is come get you a bag of fiat, you know, and then put a gag order on you so you can never talk about what happened again. So that's the unfortunate part for me, man, is, you know, you want to lose. I'm on a losing. I'm speaking for me. I'm on a losing team. This group of people, this prisoner of war class group of people, AKA Black, Negro, color, Afro-American, you're nowhere in law under the United States government. They call you all kind of names through TV. We're reading the document showing you that Black doesn't exist. Black people has never been written in law. Negro is not written in law. Afro-American was not written in law. right? So it's like, damn, I'm a part of a group of people that don't really exist under the law. We're not organized. We got no pushback on any group of people when murder happens, which is the first law of nature, self-preservation. So I'm part of a weak ass group of people. Anything you want to say on that, Chief? Chief, it's unfortunate, man.
Like you said, it's us, you may be doing what you need to do individually, but again, your team is losing as collective. And unlike sports, you can't get traded from this team. You can't go ahead and try to stack the numbers and join another all-star. Nah, you're part of this team for life. And like you said, that's just the reality of the situation. But again,
and it's the men, dog. It's the men, because you being a Moor, you changing your classification, you still ain't got a defense to protect your group of people. So it's like,
none of that shit
I'm not
matters.
saying the women are going to be women. Women are nurturers, right? I'm talking about the men. We're supposed to be the protectors. You got men trying to hide behind reclassify. Okay, so you reclassify yourself. Cool. Who's going to protect whatever you trying to create?
Right.
Okay, so boom.
Still boils down to that.
Yeah, you create a tribe. Let's say on your land, you got a natural resource that's popping and the world want it. What's stopping another group of people from coming and snatching that chief, that woman, or all the people in that little village or whatever you got going on? What's stopping them from doing that? So it's like, it's embarrassing for us to keep playing these games with words and documents, and we won't get down to none of that shit matter if you ain't gonna protect whatever you building. If you can't protect it, they're gonna come take it.
Right. You got to be able to secure that shit before you start to try to build it. Because again, like you stated, it's going to be the same story. Come in, raid your shit, on to the next one. We just going to have to come to grips with that. Like you stated, as men, and that is our role to protect. So until that clicks for the majority of us, it's going to be the same situation. And again, all you're doing is following natural law when you're moving in that way, as far as saying, okay, I understand my duty. I'm going to have to protect my loved ones, my family, etc. Everything else, whatever you're trying to do under trust, under these different entities, all right, that's cool. But again, what's stopping them from putting a bullet in your head? Nothing. So we have to come to that reality and say, fuck it. We have to be the ones to protect ourselves. Like I stated, nobody's coming to save us. Like you said, that responsibility is on the men of our group. So we have to be able to and be willing to lay our life on the line if we actually want to be free. Or else we can just continue to talk about, the situations, continue to show them documents that, this is what y'all said, this is what's actually happening. At the end of the day, they can say, yeah, cool, okay, you got us with the documents. What you gonna do about it?
You want to answer original Skywalker last question before we get out of here? She said, just remember you was given the situation. You didn't volunteer for this.
Situation in regards to, let me see if he can expound on it. I think I know what he's talking about, but definitely want to.
Either he or she, yeah, just remember you was given the situation. No, nobody can give you anything as a man. You have to accept it. You got to consent to it.
Facts. Salute to you. This is not for everyone. This is for us. We are the ones showing here. People on the messages. People don't believe in the messages. Like you said, we just got to do our duty, man. Got to do our duty. Like you said,
people walk out the room when you start talking like that. When you start talking to the men and trying to see where your heart at, that's when people start getting up and walking out the room, because you can't hide behind anything at that point. You got to look at your significant other and your kids and your elders and your family, and you have to look, you got to look them in the face and just admit you're pussy. You just have to, just the fact that we're living in a time where if you're a police officer, you put a body camera on before you go to work and clock in. So the fact that you'll still kill somebody with the body camera on, and you know it's excessive and it's unjustified for what you're doing it for, you're doing it because you don't fear any pushback from that family of that person you just killed.
Yeah. Bingo.
Gotta really think about that. They put body cameras on. That's like if I know I'm recorded on the type of job, if I had a job where I know I'm being surveillanced and recorded, you're gonna always know, let me move accordingly, let me govern myself accordingly, let me make sure I square my actions because I already know everything's documented. They don't think they don't know that when they put that uniform on, and the fact that they'll still blow your brains out on body cam video, that means they don't fear the men in your community. They don't fear your family. There's no fear of any kind of retaliation. You can't live like that as a group of people amongst other groups of people that have men. As a lion, you can't operate in the jungle like that. You can't be the lion that's got the pride in the cubs, and they can just come snatch one of yours at any given time and there's no retaliation. You can't operate like that on planet Earth. You may think that sounds too raw or too real, but it's natural law. Self-preservation is the first law of nature. If any man knows they can just come pick one of yours off and there's no retaliation, that shit ain't gonna stop.
No, that's real shit though. That's real shit. Yeah, so you just said it plainly right there, man. I ain't even got nothing to add to that one. Yeah, you're not gonna stop being bullied until you face the bully. It's plain and simple like that. You're gonna have to stand up and fight. Whether you get your ass whooped or not, you already been getting your ass whooped. We already been getting our ass whooped as a group, so might as well do the alternative and at least fight. Still gonna get your ass whooped if you choose not to. So what's the alternative? You know, and that's just the reality of the situation.
All right, thank everybody for showing up. We'll be here same time to next weekend. Till next week, peace out.
Salute to y'all.